14.3 Short-Run Costs. This chapter deals with all short-run total cost curves: total cost, total fixed cost, total variable cost, marginal cost, relation between productivity and marginal cost as a slope of total variable cost. This chapter explains different types of short-run cost incurred by a firm in the production of goods and services. Short-run is that period during which two conditions hold. Existing firms face limits imposed by some fixed factors of production. New firms cannot enter and existing firms cannot exist in an industry. It describes relationship between output and cost using three cost concepts: total cost, marginal cost, and average cost. Cost is the cost of all factors of production used by a firm. Total cost divides into two costs: total fixed cost and total variable cost. Total cost is sum of total fixed cost and total variable cost, that is TC is equal to TFC plus TVC. Total fixed cost. In the short run, all firms, competitive or non-competitive, have costs that must bear regardless of their output. In fact, some costs must be paid even if the firm stops producing, that is, even if output is zero. These kinds of costs are called fixed costs, and firms cannot do anything in the short run to avoid them or to change them. In the long run, the firm has no fixed cost because it can expand, contract, or exit the industry. Total fixed cost is sometimes called overhead. Overhead expenses are what it costs to run the business. Fixed costs are those costs that do not vary with changes in output. Fixed costs are associated with the very existence of firm's plant and therefore must be paid even if its output is zero. Such costs are rental payments or long-term lease, interest on the firm's debts, insurance premiums, property taxes, salaries of basic administrative staffs are generally fixed costs. They are fixed and do not change even if firms produces more. They are also called sunk costs because firms have no control over fixed costs in the short run. Firms have no choice but to pay them. Total fixed cost curve. The figure shows the total fixed cost as a function of output. Because TFC does not change with output, the graph is simply a straight horizontal line at 1000. Total variable costs. Variable inputs can be varied in the short run is a sum of costs at varied level of output. They increase or decrease as production increases or decreases. Inputs that are typically variable in the short run includes hourly and part-time labor, office supplies, energy and raw materials. If a firm or company wants to produce more, it hires more workers or purchases more raw materials. If the company wants to produce less or cut costs, it can stop buying raw materials or have some workers work fewer hours a week. Variable costs are also called operating expenses as they are required to run the business and cannot be avoided are the results of a business normal operations, such as materials, labors, and machinery involved in production. Variable cost is calculated by formula cost per unit times total number of units. Total variable cost. The table shows the total variable cost. The middle column or the center column is the total variable cost of producing each quantity, which is exactly $0 if no units are produced. The firm incurs no variable cost when they employ no workers or buy no materials, their variable inputs. It rises to $43 if 10 units are produced. This is the essence of variable cost. Greater production entails greater total variable cost. To produce more units, the firm needs to hire more labor and buy more materials. Because these inputs incur a cost, TVC rises with extra production. The incremental increase in total variable cost is not the same for each quantity. It does not rise at a constant rate. This incremental change in TVC reflects marginal cost, a key concept in the short-term production and supply decision of a firm. Total variable cost curve. The total variable cost curve is an inverted S-shaped and has a positive slope. This curve begins relatively steep from zero, then flattens before turning increasingly steep once again. TVC curve shows the cost of production using the best available technique at each output level given current factor prices. The slope of the total variable cost curve flattens as the first 4 units are produced due to increasing marginal returns found in stage 1 of production. This is because in the initial stage of production, there is scope for efficient utilization of fixed factor by using more of the variable factor. Hence, as the variable input employed increases, the productive efficiency of variable inputs ensures that the TVC increases but at a diminishing rate. This makes the first part of the TVC curve, that is concave. It becomes increasingly steeper after the 4th units is produced. This range of output corresponds with the decreasing marginal returns found in second stage of production. As the production continues to increase, more and more variable factor or worker is employed for a given amount of fixed input. The productive efficiency of each variable factor falls and it adds more to the cost of production. So the TVC increases but now at an increasing rate. This is where the TVC curve is convex in shape, and so the TVC curve gets an inverted S shape. Total cost curve. The shortened cost can be expressed as TFC plus TVC. Thus, we can get the shape of the TC curve by summing over TFC and TVC curves. The total cost curve has a positive slope. As the quantity of output produced increases, so too does total cost. However, the slope of the total cost curve is not constant. It is relatively steep for small quantities, flattens for an intermediate level of production, then once again steepens for the larger quantities. The shape of the total cost curve is based on shortened production returns, especially the law of diminishing marginal returns. The total cost curve does not go through the origin, but rather begins at a positive value on the vertical axis. In other words, if the quantity of output is 0, total cost is positive. This vertical intercept indicates fixed costs. This is a summation of short-run total cost curves. The table shows the Sam's Smoothies total cost, in which there is total fixed cost of $10 and total variable cost is calculated, and total fixed cost plus total variable cost gives the total cost. The highlighted row in red shows to produce 6 gallons of smoothies, Sam hires 3 workers. So the wage rate per hour is $6. So the total variable cost is calculated by quantity of labor times wage rate. So TVC is the cost of 3 workers or laborers. 3 times $6 is $18. Therefore, the total cost is TFC plus TVC. So the TFC is $10 plus the variable cost is $18. So it totals the total cost is $28. And the left hand side shows the graphical representation of all the 3 costs, that is TFC, TVC and TC. So this is the illustration of the total cost curves. The TC curve is inverted S-shaped. This is because of TVC curve. Since the TFC curve is horizontal, the difference between the TC and TVC curve is the same at each level of output and equals TFC. So this is explained as TC minus TVC is equal to TFC. The TFC curve is parallel to the horizontal axis while the TVC curve is inverted S-shaped. Thus, the TC curve is the same shape as TVC but begins from the point of TFC rather than the origin. The law that explains the shape of TVC and subsequently TC is called the law of variable proportions or law of diminishing returns. Marginal cost or MC. The firm's marginal cost is a change in total cost that results from producing one more unit of output or extra or additional cost to produce one more unit. Marginal cost reflects changes in variable cost because they vary when output changes. Marginal cost is independent of fixed cost because fixed costs do not change when output changes. The table below shows how marginal cost measures the additional cost of inputs required to produce each successive unit of output. Marginal cost actually is the slope of the total variable cost curve. It is thus calculated by dividing change in TVC by the change in output of one unit. Or you can say change in TVC is nothing but marginal cost, which is calculated by change in total cost over change in quantity. See the relation between productivity and marginal cost. This is one way of deriving marginal cost. In the short run, every firm is constrained by some fixed input that leads to diminishing returns to variable inputs and limits its capacity to produce. As a firm approaches that capacity, it becomes increasingly costly to produce at successively higher levels of output. Marginal cost ultimately increases with output in the short run. MC curve is U-shaped because of law of diminishing returns. In the short run, capital is fixed. After a certain point, increasing extra workers leads to declining productivity. Therefore, as we employ more workers, the marginal cost increases. It is illustrated in the figure. So the highlights of the figure is MC curve is the mirror of MP curve. MP curve and MC curve are inversely related. MP rises first, reaches maximum and then declines, and MC falls first, reaches minimum and then rises. Employment of labor causes MP to fall even to zero or to become negative while MC continuously rises. Graphing marginal cost as slope of total variable cost. This is another method of deriving a marginal cost curve. The shape of the marginal cost curve is consistent with short-term diminishing returns. At first, MC declines, but eventually the fixed factor of production begins to constrain the firm. The marginal cost rises. Graphically, MC curve is the slope of the TVC curve. The slope of the curve at any one of its points is the slope of the tangent at that point. Suppose output increases from OQ1 to OQ2 and total cost increases from OC1 to OC2. We have drawn a tangent on the TVC curve at point S. Thus, MC at this point will be equal to the slope of the tangent, that is MC is equal to OC2 minus OC1 over OQ2 minus OQ1, which is a change in quantity. Change in cost, total cost over change in quantity is equal to SR over PR. As one moves from P to S, the distance between these 2 points becomes smaller and smaller and the slope of the tangent gradually declines till PS is reached. At this point, the slope of the tangent corresponding to the output OQ3 is smallest and MC is the lowest. This means that MC falls until OQ3 is produced. The tangent at point N is also ray from the origin. However, as the slope of the tangent to the TVC curve raises after OQ3 output, MC starts rising. This is the inflection point. Slope changes from concave to convex. It is the lowest point on MC curve and variable cost is smallest. Therefore, the marginal cost curve is U-shaped. Review of total cost and marginal cost. In the short run, total cost TC is equal to TFC plus TVC. In the long run, since TFC is equal to 0, TC is equal to TVC. Thus, we can get the shape of the total cost curve by summing over TFC and TVC curves. Total fixed cost, TFC cost of fixed inputs that do not change with level of output. They can be incurred even if the production is 0. TFC curve is a straight line parallel to horizontal axis. Total variable cost, TVC, vary with level of output. TVC is equal to 0 when level of output is 0. TVC is calculated. The formula is TVC is equal to L times W. L is number of labors, W is wage rate, which is nothing but the cost of the laborers or variable input. The shape of TVC curve is inverted S shape. Marginal cost is a change in the total cost by an additional or extra unit of production. MC is equal to change in TC over change in Q. That is change in total cost over change in quantity. The shape of MC curve is U-shaped.